That's right. Today we are talking about the all-new Ford 2020 GT500 Mustang. Thursday I was able to go and participate in a media event with Ford at Sonoma Raceway, also known as Sears Point, and what an experience it was. And getting to check out the GT500 and drive the car and talk to engineers about the car and the marketing team. The car is absolutely brilliant. And unfortunately though, it was a truncated day due to the pandemic, and so I didn't get to film as much there on site as I want to, so that's why we're back here in the garage talking some of the technical specs about the car. But I also want to go ahead, because of the pandemic, I want to talk about what they went ahead and did as precautions, because I know if I don't, somebody out there is going to see this and go and complain to either myself or to YouTube or the racetrack or Ford, and there's just no need for that. So let's go ahead and we talk about what Ford did to prepare for the event, just so that way everyone knows they were completely compliant with California requirements and the racetrack requirements and kept everybody safe. So for starters, there were only about a little over 24 of us there as journalists to participate in the event, so it was a low attendance event, and so that was able to make it easier for the social distancing aspect of it. And of course, as soon as we got there, they provided us with Ford masks as well as hand sanitizers. They had hand sanitization stations all over the place as well. They had markers for social distancing when we were in areas that were a little more confined. They also, of course, reminded us to keep our distance and stuff from like that, as well as had signage posted. And then they provided us with head socks for helmets. And then, of course, after each use, the helmets were put in these big sanitization boxes where they sanitized the helmets before the next person used them. They sanitized the vehicles, they sanitized everything, and they had these really neat looking sanitizing guns that just sprayed sanitizer and they wiped everything down. So Ford did an amazing job maintaining all of the requirements that California and the facility implemented in order to make sure everybody was safe who was in attendance. So I applaud them for that. Whether or not you agree that all of it is necessary is outside the scope of this video. I just want to go ahead and put that out there that yes, Ford did an amazing job at meeting all the requirements that were put on them to allow us to have this event. And so hats off to them for going through and jumping through all those hoops to allow us to have this event and participate because it was a great experience, and I'm really glad and fortunate I was able to do so. So enough of that. Let's go ahead and talk about what you guys have actually clicked on here, and that's the new GT500 Mustang. And as a Mopar guy, I gotta say, Ford did a brilliant job with this car. I can't say enough good things about it. The car performs insanely well. It's ridiculously fast, but that's what you'd expect, right? I mean, the car's got a 5.2 liter V8 that's supercharged and producing 760 horsepower. The engine is an absolute beast, and it's mated to a 7-speed DCT transmission. Now, for those of you that aren't aware what a DCT transmission is, it stands for dual clutch transmission. And it's something that's been pretty commonplace in the exotic world for like the last 10 years or so. I think one of the Ferrari's first cars that they put it in was the 458 Italia, and that came out in 2010. And it's a brilliant transmission. So the way it works, it's not an automatic transmission, but it's not a true manual transmission because you don't operate a third pedal. And you don't shift the gears by hand. It's all handled by the transmission. But unlike an automatic transmission where it's filled with clutches and bands and planetary gear sets and servos and valves and all sorts of stuff to make it change gears, the DCT it's like a manual transmission on the internals. It's got gears and synchros and shafts and gear selectors and things like that. But the way it makes it unique that it works so well is the dual clutch part of it. So it's got two clutches. It's got one that operates the even gears, and it's got one that operates the odd gears. And then it has a computer that handles the changing of the gears and engaging and disengaging clutches. So instead of you having to operate your foot for the clutch pedal and your hand for the shift lever, the computer does it for you. And it does it really brilliantly. This transmission was outsourced by Ford to Tremec. They had a Tremec engineer on site for this event, which was great being able to talk to them about the transmission and its design. and it works amazingly well, as you would expect at this point in the game, especially for a Mustang that costs on average probably about $80,000 depending on how you spec it out. And it was really, really nice to see how it performed, how it worked, because when I've had Mustangs in the past with their automatic transmission, I haven't been impressed with it, and I have to put it in like track mode or race mode in order to get it just to function what I consider halfway decent. But this one right out of the gate works insanely well. I was really impressed. But then again, it was built by Tremec, who has been building transmissions for muscle cars and other vehicles for decades. The Viper's T56 transmission, that's a Tremec. Your Challengers out there that have the TR6060, that's a Tremec. Your Mustangs, your Camaros, Challengers, Corvettes even, they've all got Tremec transmissions. And so they know what they're doing, and this is one of the first dual clutch transmissions that Tremec has done. They've also got another one on the market right now that you're probably familiar with in the new C8 Corvette. Now, I don't want to say that these two DCT transmissions are the same. They're not. The DCT in the Mustang is up in the front of the car, mounted directly to the transmission, or directly to the engine, sorry. And then whereas the one in the C8 is a transaxle, it's still mounted directly to the engine, but it's in the back of the car. So apples and oranges, and the technology involved in changing gears and stuff is the same because the same manufacturer and they're DCTs, but the two transmissions are very different. So it was interesting as we were talking to the marketing guys about it, and he was a manual guy like I'm a manual guy, and he told me, he said, you're gonna go out there and you're gonna experience this DCT and you're gonna wanna go ahead and hand up your clutch pedal. And he was not correct. The DCT was really nice. It worked brilliantly, but I mean, I've driven DCTs before, and I've driven a wide variety of Ferraris. I've driven the Porsche with their PDKs, and so I'm definitely no stranger to them. They work insanely well. They're definitely way faster than any person out there can shift. But for me, as you know, if you watch my video on why I prefer manuals, I just prefer the extra driving experience. Now, sure, if I want to go back and have set lap records or not have to worry about operating a clutch and thinking about shifting and stuff, sure, the DCTs are definitely the way to go because it does make it that much easier and takes that much more thinking out of the process. Of course, you can put it in manual mode and operate the paddles and do it that way if you prefer. So you've got the option there. But for me, of course, I will always, as long as I'm driving, prefer a manual transmission. It's just ingrained in me. So that said, the car, it's really impressive what Ford has been able to do with this car. It really puts down some serious power, and it handles really well. I was really impressed. So I'll show, of course, videos later on here of all actual laps and stuff, but we did lead follows, we did hot laps with professional drivers, and what also really impressed me about this car was how well it both performed on the road course as well as the drag strip. And you can option the car out in different ways with different aero packages and stuff to set it up either for road course racing or drag strip racing. And so it's really a versatile car that has a lot of capabilities in it. So I was really impressed with that. And of course, the styling. I've always been a fan of this current generation of Mustang and how it looks. The car really has a great look to it. And when the silhouette was first announced of the GT500 from the front of it, I wasn't sold on it. I had some concerns, and I was definitely, of course, going to hold my reservations until I saw the unveiling of the car. But I was definitely not super excited just based off of what the silhouette looked like. Then, of course, when they unveiled the car last year, and then I saw it in person at the SEMA show, I fell in love with the looks of the car. And it looks so aggressive. It looks like a total badass. And it's just an amazing looking machine. And what Ford did was just absolutely brilliant. Really, the only fault that I'm finding at this point with this car is the fact that you don't get the third pedal. But if you want a third pedal, you can buy the GT350, which has the flat plane crankshaft V8, and it does have a third pedal option. And for 2020, they've got a Heritage Edition model, which I am just absolutely in love with. That is the Wimbledon white with Guardsman blue racing stripes, and it just looks amazing. So, of course, the perfect world, you buy the GT350 for the 3-pedal, and you buy the GT500 for the DCT, and then you've got both. But of course, now you're spending a lot of money. But that being said, if you only had to choose one, and you really wanted that track-focused car, you're gonna wanna get the GT500. The car, it just works really well. One interesting thing is also it's got a line lock built in from the factory, and it's got 2 modes for the line lock. It's got one with traction control mode on and one with traction control mode off. The clip at the very beginning of this video, that was with the traction control mode turned off. And what happens is with the traction control off, when you're done doing the burnout, the car will continue on and do smoke the tires for a certain distance till you let off. Now with traction control mode on, when you get done doing your burnout, it just cuts it. It doesn't kill the engine, but it stops doing the rotation of the tires. And so here's a clip of how that actually looks. So now with the line lock, it's not as simple as just a push of a button and go. There is a bit of a process you have to go through, they told us. Unfortunately, they couldn't demonstrate for every one of us just because they didn't have enough cars because of the pandemic situation and having to sanitize between them. But they told us there was a bit of a process you have to go through to do the line lock because they don't want you accidentally implementing it while you're just at a stoplight. So that's understandable. Now, one of the other things, of course, was a little bit unfortunate due to the time constraints was I wasn't able to go through and play with all the settings and all the infotainment and get a full understanding of what they've got going on in there. But with the way the digital instrument cluster works, it does change how the appearance based off of which mode you're in on the car. And so that's kind of nice. It gives you different priorities on, tach and speedometer and all the different gauges and features and things like that. So it's pretty nice that they've got those options going on. And then of course, the interior, it's really comfortable. You've got the option for these great, really bolstered Recaro seats. They're super comfortable. Probably not as comfortable as like the wife's Charger and for long distances, but then again, they're track seats. They're not luxury comfy seats, but they get the job done. They work really well. They're super bolstered, and I really felt comfortable and secure in them. So they're great seats. And there are a lot of options with the Mustang. The most expensive option has to be the carbon track package. It's like an $18,000 option, I believe. And you get things like carbon wheels, carbon brakes, and some other carbon components like the carbon aero and stuff. There was a various wing options available for the car for depending on how much downforce and stuff that you want, what type of track setups you're doing. So that was nice to see. In addition to the Tremec engineer and the Ford engineers, they also had Michelin engineers on site talking about the tires and the compounds and what they went to design them and set them up. So that was pretty cool. There are a couple of tire options available for the GT500, both Michelins, of course. They also had a rep from Recaro there to talk about Recaro and the seats and proper motions to get in and out of the seats. And it was just a really well sought out event. Great cars. And like I said before, and can't say enough, the GT500 is a brilliant car. And it comes down to personal preference, of course. These cars at this point, they're all performing so really well. It comes down to which car really speaks to you and your emotions. It does crazy things on the track, stuff I didn't think a Mustang would be able to do. We were really putting it through the paces. And when I did a hot lap with a pro driver, which we'll have a clip of later, we went out in a car that only had the steel brakes, and the steel brakes worked insanely well. I was really impressed. I asked, when we first got on those brakes super hard, and I asked the driver, I said, do we have the carbon brakes on this car? He said, no, this is just the steel brake model. And it was really impressive. They really spent their time, did their homework on this car to make a properly functioning setup car that's going to work really well for the track. And as always, Ford just kills it with the exhaust note. I don't know what Ford does, but forever and a day, Ford has always made insanely amazing sounding V8s. And the 5.2 in this GT500 is no exception. It sounds incredible. Here's what it sounds like. You're not gonna wanna miss out on this one. So of course, while the comparison between these two isn't the most accurate, nevertheless, it's going to happen just because of the timing and the price point is kind of similar. And that's between the GT500 and the C8. Now, I haven't driven a C8 yet, definitely haven't driven one on the track, but I have seen them, I have sat in them and gotten a feel for them in that regards. And for me, hands down, there is no comparison. The GT500 beats the C8 in every aspect. Sorry Chevy, sorry GM, but that's just my opinion and based off of my experiences. And there's a lot of factors that have brought me to this conclusion. First is long-term pricing of the car and the value of the car. Now, at the end of the day, you can start pricing a C8 at like $60,000. The GT500 starts a little higher, around $70,000, I believe. But of course, you can price them out even higher. You can get both cars up to close to around $100,000, I believe, fully loaded. And so there is some overlap in the pricing. Now, initial price, similar, maybe a little higher for the Mustang versus the Corvette, but long term on the depreciation scale, as awesome as the new C8 is for performance and being a mid-engine, and the next closest mid-engine vehicle in category is probably double the price point, at the end of the day, it's just a base Corvette and it's going to depreciate and it's going to take a huge hit on its value in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, the GT500 on the other hand, yes, it's a Mustang, but it's a GT500. So it's a low production car, it's going to be limited, it's going to be exclusive, and so long term, it'll probably depreciate some in the next 5 to 10 years, but it's going to be a lot smaller of a depreciation hit than you're going to get on the C8. And then long term, 20, 30 years out for collectability standpoint, sure, the C8 base model is the first year or years of a mid-engine design for the Corvette, but still, they're gonna be making mid-engine Corvettes for God knows how many years in the future. And they're basically probably all gonna be mid-engine Corvettes from here on out. So I don't see that as being a huge factor in what the long-term pricing is gonna be. But the GT500, anytime we've seen in the past with the GT500 moniker on there, it's a special car. It's a limited car. It's gonna hold its value. It's gonna be a good investment in the long term. But that's one of the big factors in why the GT500 is a better car than the C8. Now, also, next factor, of course, is gonna be interior comfort and design. And as much as I don't like digital instrument clusters, the one in the Ford is decent. It still kind of gives you the shape and the feel of the old 60s Mustangs. Porsche, I think, has done the best so far with their new 992 Porsche lineup on the 911, but that's another topic altogether. But it still feels like an evolution of the Mustang in there. It's comfortable, you've got room. You can either get it with or without a back seat if you want to have passengers, or you want to have maximum weight reduction for racing. Either way, and I just really enjoy the styling. Now, a lot of people tell me this doesn't matter when it comes to the C8, but for me, it really does, and that's the passenger experience. A lot of car people out there, they go solo on events and stuff, and so what the passenger experience is like doesn't matter to them. But for me, in my situation, where my wife goes with me on virtually all the car events that I go to, the passenger experience does matter. And if the passenger's not having a good time because they're cramped and uncomfortable, then that's not a car that's gonna stick around long in my garage. And the way that Chevy has designed the C8, the entire car is just overly exaggerated in design, and I think they try to do that to appeal to as many people as possible, but at the same time, it turns off a lot of people because it's just overly complicated. But as far as the interior goes, everything is driver centric. And I deliberately went and sat in the passenger seat because I heard from people that had been in the car that it was really claustrophobic for the passenger. And sure enough, that is absolutely the truth. And you're sitting there in this tiny cockpit and you've got this wall on the console next to you where all these buttons are, and you just feel like you're really cramped in there. And as a passenger, I would not want to be in that car for any real length of distance. And so that's a huge drawback for me on the C8 and its interior design. Plus, I'm just not really feeling how the layout is and all this stuff that they got going on, the square steering wheel. And it sounds cool because it's different than what everybody's doing, but at the same time, it's kind of funky to use and feel. And then that row of buttons on the console, I'm looking at these and it would take so much getting used to trying to remember where all of them are. It's just not the brilliant and best design as far as I'm concerned. And then of course, the infotainment system they've got on that one is just sticking up in the middle of the dash, and it looks okay from when you're sitting in it, but if you're looking through the windshield at it, it's just random iPad sticking out of the dash. So again, from the interior standpoint, Chevy went super futuristic or whatever with the interior design, and it was a huge miss for me. I prefer the GT500's interior design, and so that's another huge factor. And then of course, the exterior design, I just love the looks of this menacing, insane GT500, and I'm not that fond of this overly designed exterior styling on the C8 Corvette. So of course, those factors come down to personal taste. A lot of people are going to love the C8 exterior design. A lot of people are going to love the GT500 design. A number of people are probably going to love both, and that's great. But for me, I would not own a C8. It's just not going to happen. But the GT500, seriously, and this is saying something. I would absolutely buy a GT500 Mustang. The thought has crossed my mind ever since I saw the unveiling of it, and now actually having driven and experienced the car. It's that brilliant. It is such an amazing car. It sounds amazing. It looks amazing, and it performs insanely well. Better than I thought it would perform. But the reason why I'm not is because I've got other focus right now on something else I'm trying to buy, and that's going to be taking up all of my focus. So unfortunately, no GT500 now. In the future, maybe, who knows? We'll see how it goes. But for now, it's just not in the cards. So that's enough of me rambling on about some of the technical stuff, some of my thoughts on the GT500. Let's go ahead and jump into the videos that I shot Thursday morning at Sears Point Raceway, Race Sonoma, for those of you who aren't familiar with the old school terminology. And I hope you enjoy everything that I put together for this video. Today we have a special treat for you. I'm here at Race Sonoma. For those of you old school like me, Sears Point Raceway, and we're here for a media event testing out the brand new GT500 Mustang from Ford. Now this car is absolutely insane. I just spent the entire morning going through it, going on the road course, going on the drag strip. Let's go ahead and jump into some B-roll. All right, so the way Ford had set up this event, we did two stints out on the road course. We did one in a lead follow, and then we did a hot lap afterwards with their pro drivers to see what the car's really capable of. Now, unfortunately with the lead follow, we really didn't get to push it too hard. It's kind of like a 4, maybe a 5/10 pace. It's with this type of a media event, it's a little challenging to be able to gauge everybody's level of confidence on their track and their experience. So of course they tone it down a little bit to meet everybody's needs, but it gives you a good feel for how the car can perform. Now, of course, after we went around the track and did our lead follow, we went and did a right seat with a pro driver to see what the car is really capable of. Let's go ahead and show you that video. It's a little shaky. I'm still getting used to doing a handheld on this camera, but it's a lot of fun. I think you're gonna enjoy it. So after we got done with the lead follow, we went ahead out to the drag strip, where unfortunately because of the pandemic, they couldn't let us all drive because they didn't have time to sanitize all of that stuff. But we did get a right seat with a pro driver and do the drag strip with them. And so let's go ahead and I'll show you that video. What was really great with having the pro driver on there, you got to really experience what the car's really capable of in a drag strip situation. I know when I went on my second run, we hit 130 miles an hour trap speed, and that is just insane. So one of the special treats they had a big like garage setup where they had a variety of cars show on. It highlighted their new lineup, including the new Mach 1, the high output 4-cylinder EcoBoost, which has the new Ford RS engine in it, the GT350 Heritage Edition, of course, the GT500. But there were two cars that really caught my attention, and they were experimental prototypes built in the 60s. One of them, the green car, has independent rear suspension, and then the red car was truly special. It had a twin supercharged big block in it, and it is just absolutely insane. Let's go ahead and show you that right now. And so that's my day with the GT500 Mustang and Ford. I really want to thank Ford for allowing me to come and participate in today's event. It was an absolute blast. I really love this car. It's truly an amazing machine. If you're thinking about getting one, go ahead and do it because you're not going to regret it. And the car is fabulous. It performs like nobody's business. It corners insanely well considering it's a front engine setup, and you're not going to be disappointed with this GT500. So that's today's video. I hope you guys were entertained. I know I was super excited and had a great time today, and I just can't rave enough about today's event and all the fun that we had. And I'm going to go ahead and get some lunch, and as always, if you like today's video, don't forget, smash that like button, give us a thumbs up, help us out with that YouTube algorithm, of course. And as always, if you want to be kept up to date of all my future uploads, don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below and ring that notification bell as well, so that way YouTube will keep you up to date with all of my uploads that I do in the future. And as always, guys, I will see you the next video.
Thank you.